Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on a Tuesday night, the 15th of January, my daughter's birthday. She turns 30 this year. I turn 60 this year. And I do it in 12 days. Happy Tuesday to you. Hope everybody had a great day. We got a lot to talk about, a lot going on. Two weather systems lie ahead. The first one that is going to be impacting the parts of the Ohio Valley, and also as we head into Thursday night into Friday morning, my neck of the woods, across Pennsylvania into New England and New Jersey, Long Island, and even down into parts of Virginia and Maryland. So it's a light event. It doesn't look like a big deal. What it will accomplish, by the way, is Boston is in a snow drought. They have not seen an inch of snow yet this season. They are basically in a snow hole, and the snow hole actually, if you think about it, extends. Every winter there's always, even in the midst of areas that are getting above average snowfall. The Mid-Atlantic states, above average snowfall for the winter. Central and upstate New York and central and northern New England, either near or above average snowfall. But when you get into southern New England, down to about New York City, and then down to about the Maryland state line, or maybe even a little bit further south than that, we're talking about, in eastern Pennsylvania probably in that area too, there's this section that, if it wasn't for that November snowfall, snowfall would be down to nothing in some instances. New York City hasn't seen an inch of snow since that 6-inch snowfall back in November. So Boston may actually get that drought broken come Thursday night into Friday. And also, of course, we have the second storm that is going to be the more important system that I would call a storm, is going to be impacting a large area of geography. And I think we're going to start to see later in the week, you're going to begin to see winter storm watches going up for probably parts of the Ohio Valley, extending eastward to upstate New York, and also in through interior New England. And we might even see winter storm watches extended, put up a bit further south than that. This is going to cover a large area in terms of the potential snowfall. And it's a very, very complex forecast. I want to, an outlook. I want to kind of get into that when we do the longer range, show you the upper air, and we'll do a little drawing like we usually do on the paint box, so we can take a look at what's actually going on. And by the way, all of this, regardless of what the outcome is with the snow or ice or rain from that second weather system, it is going to bring down some bitter cold air into the eastern part of the U.S. Behind it. And we're going to see these temperatures that are going to drop down into the teens, single digits, and even below zero come Monday morning, depending on where you are. So this is an important system. I think the two systems this week really kind of set the stage of important events that are going on in the atmosphere as we head toward the latter part of January and into February. Who knows where it ultimately winds up, but we're going to have fun getting there. Welcome tonight to those of you who are on my Google app for Android devices, which is absolutely free, and you can download on Google Play and enjoy it. It's just go to Google Play and search meteorologist Joe Chaffee, or just Joe Chaffee, and if you want to notice how to spell it, it's right over there at the top of the screen. And I also want to say welcome to my Patreon members on the Patreon weather platform, which is a subscription platform, and it's just $2 a month, and I'll put a link up there later. It's also on the descriptor to this live stream, or if you're watching this on a replay, descriptor to this video. We do a lot of stuff over there, including additional live streams, my schedule permitting. And also welcome to the members of the Facebook page, Angry Ben's Angry Weather, meteorologist Jeff Banson. We also have folks from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Stormwatch page, and also from my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Let me give you a heads up also in the next couple of days. Joe Rayo, there won't be a Joe and Joe weather show tonight. on Facebook. I may go solo if I'm not too tired, because it's been a long day. But Joe will be back tomorrow, and he said he'd love to join the YouTube live stream. And as things get a little, weather-wise get even more complicated toward the end of the week, he may join those as well. So we've got that to look forward to. And by the way, if you're into astronomy, with the lunar eclipse coming Sunday night, depending on where you are, whether the sky's clear out or not, if Joe's big on astronomy, he gave a lecture at Pace University last week, and it's on my YouTube channel. I put it up yesterday, so if you haven't seen it, go ahead and take a look at it. He talks about a lot of things with regards to the state of astronomy today, because it's quote-unquote graying. There are not a lot of young folks that are getting into it, because they're sort of wrapped up into their video games and their phones and everything else. But so that's an issue. He talks about the lunar eclipse coming up and other celestial events that will be happening in the next few years. So if you're into astronomy as well as meteorology, take a look at that video. Again, it's on my YouTube channel. All right, let's get started. Going to start off with the current advisories, watches, warnings, and so on. And we have out in the west, it is very busy out in the west tonight. We've got blizzard warnings up for the Sierra Nevadas there. You see it in the orange up in eastern California along the Nevada state line. And many of those areas are going to get their snow in feet as a moisture-laden strong storm has been just pumping the rain inland into California, and there's cold air around, so they're getting a ton of snow out there. And we also have flood watches up. You can see them in the green for many counties in interior California, and high wind and warnings and wind advisories up and down, mostly north of LA. And we still have some winter storm warnings up in the mountains surrounding LA for tonight into tomorrow. We've got some winter weather advisories that are up in and around the Great Lakes. Some of these areas did get some snow from the last weather event. I just want to check because they did have them up for freezing drizzle yesterday, and they have them up for freezing drizzle again. This is for the overnight. So a bunch of the area that you see here dealing with temperatures that are down below freezing, and they also have fog issues as well. So it's kind of nasty out there in parts of the Midwest with the remnants of a lot of these areas up here have substantial snow cover from the storm from Friday and Saturday. And there's going to be some more snow coming as the next weather system comes out of the southwest. And even as we look there, we have various winter weather advisories that are up, and also we have some. I want to see what this is with the darker blue. If those are avalanche warnings, let's take a look. Those are actually, sometimes I can't see the color very well. They actually do have avalanche watches up in parts of Colorado and Utah. Actually, I'm sorry, in parts of Utah. And the areas that look like that, it's actually like that, I don't even know how to describe that color. When it comes to coloring clothes, I'm not good. I can't color coordinate very well. But that's actually winter storm watch. It's a shade of blue, I guess. We'll just leave it at that. But busy for sure with respect to these watches and warnings in the impacted areas. And it's only going to get busier over the next couple of days. I want to look at WPC's, the Weather Prediction Center's precip map, because this is important, and this is going to take into account the system that we're going to be dealing with, the second weather system in particular, that's going to produce some substantial rains, and there probably will be even some stronger thunderstorms to deal with when the low takes shape and the trailing cold front runs across the Gulf states. But you can see that the WPC, which I always say is usually pretty good with their rainfall predictions and outlooks, doing quite a bullish outlook with respect to rainfall across the Tennessee Valley The scale on the side, you see the colors here. We're talking about 3 inches or more, 3-4 inch rainfalls across parts of Kentucky and Tennessee. And also for eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and on into southern New England. If this storm tracks the way the models are suggesting, where we wind up with a low that heads up into western Pennsylvania and eventually up into coastal Maine. So we're talking about an inland track here. There's going to be some heavy rains near the warm front that's going to try to push up northward for a brief time anyway toward New Jersey and Long Island. And along and north of that warm front, you're going to probably see some fairly substantial rainfall. Out in the west, big rains up and down the coast being indicated, all the way down into Southern California, hugging the coastline, and then you see it how it widens out. And look at how much precip is being shown in the area where we have these blizzard warnings. We're looking at 3, 4, 5 inch rain amounts in that orange. That runs up through Northern California and on up through the coast of Oregon and Washington and into Canada there, into southwestern Canada. So a very wet period ahead for both sides. And where it's cold enough, we're talking snow and possibly some substantial snows here. The weather system for the second one for this weekend, I think it's going to bring at least 4 inches or more of snow to cities like Chicago and Detroit. They're kind of on the northern edge of this, all right? But you go a bit further south into central Illinois, down to maybe near or just north of St. Louis in an east-west band that will run through Indiana and Ohio into northwestern PA, maybe just north of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's kind of on the cusp here with regards to where the heavy snow sets up, and then eventually on up through much of upstate New York and interior New England. It might be south of I-90. I don't know where the southern edge of this is going to wind up eventually. It's a little bit complicated in the east in some areas as to where you might see snow at the start, changing over to heavy rain, changing back to ice and then to snow before it's all said and done. So this is going to be definitely a big weather maker for the weekend. And it's not, by the way, my area that I usually focus on, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. So we talk about Philadelphia, New York City, Long Island, Connecticut, the lower Hudson Valley. It's not just about us. Remember, much of our weather area may wind up seeing rain and some snow and ice in the mix, but the areas just to the north and to the northeast, and then of course going out to the west, are going to wind up with a pretty sizable snowfall, and then all of this winds up culminating, of course, in some very, very cold Arctic air that is going to be coming down. So I'm going to start off with the snowfall forecast map. I want to just go back out into the southwest and into California just to give you an idea. We're talking 30 to 35, 40 inch amounts through Friday on the map here, right up through the Sierra Nevadas in eastern California. You can see where Fresno and Sacramento are. So this is right through all the national forests that are out in eastern California and running northwestward from there. Also, even as you get up into northern California, you can see some patchy areas of let's call them multi-feet snows up into the mountains of northern California. Up further north, the coastal areas, and actually you have to go a little bit inland before you start to get into some of the heavier snows that will be falling up through the mountains of Oregon and points northward into Washington state. It's not quite as bullish with the snow amounts there as they are in California, but snow nonetheless, and through much of Idaho, down through Utah, western Colorado, the western half of Colorado, seeing some pretty hefty amounts in some of the mountains as well, and that even extends down into New Mexico. Now, we start to see the beginnings of snow forecasts for the weekend system here, as you see some numbers popping up for Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa, down into northern Kansas, northern Missouri, and even through into parts of Iowa. Now, this is early. This is through the last time frame here is 7 p.m. Friday. So when we check back in tomorrow, those numbers will be higher. As we go further to the east, you start to see the reflection of the snow forecast from the first weather system, where we see these 1-inch amounts through Illinois and Indiana, Indianapolis included, Chicago just outside of it. And then it picks up a little bit in Ohio, 1 to 2 inches. And then as we move into Pennsylvania and upstate New York, and also into New England, we see 3 and 4 inch plus amounts. This is not going to be a big deal. I think there's a chance, and I have it in my forecast, where New York City, Long Island, there could be a coating to 1 inch or 2. You go a little bit further inland, it could be a coating to 1 inch or 3. I also think that the models, I think the GFS is too warm, and as is the European. Judging from what I'm seeing in terms of some of the surface maps and some of the statistical models that we use, I think it's going to be a couple of degrees colder Thursday night into Friday, so that much of what falls will be in the form of snow. Again, it's not a lot, but a lot of this area hasn't seen very much snow. And then you, of course, in Maine, it's another 3-inch snowfall, which to them is practically flurries. And again, this is only through Friday night, so we are talking about the first weather system when it comes to the situation in the eastern part of the United States. Just give me 1 second, folks. I'm going to try to... I got my phone in here with me, and I'm going to see if I can pull up... I want to pull this live stream up on the phone so at least I can monitor the chat with you guys at the same time. And you might briefly hear my voice. Okay, hold on. Really suck at times, oh boy. Losing a lot of money or excuse me. Okay. There we go. All right. So now I can see your chat. So sorry for the interruption there. I see Jesse Core, Dark Legend, haven't seen you on in a while. Charlene Myers, Mary Schenkel, I'm sorry. Jaden Holmes, Martin Miles, Kathy Albano, Shelly Man Studios, Victor Jimenez, John Curry. Welcome to board, everybody. It's good to see everybody here. And someone who goes by Chief Meteorologist. Wonder who that is. I don't know. But welcome to Johnny Quest, who's going from heavy snow to heavy rain, and who knows, back to heavy snow again. We'll see. We'll see, Johnny. Linda Hernandez, Sierra Sites. Nice to see you all here. So if we're going to go to the individual maps, Sierra, so I'll show you the central Pennsylvania map in just a second. And here we go. We're going to take you around to some of the forecast maps. Looks like Washington, D.C., with less than 1 inch of snow. These are National Weather Service forecasts. And you can go to my website, meteorologistjoechaffee.com. I have a page there, a couple of links from today, in fact, where I have these snow forecast maps on there, and they update automatically. So if you pull the page up anytime, the maps will freshen. And if you've got an Android device, if you download my app, on the home page, I have every snow forecast map on there from the Weather Service from Maine all the way down to Georgia. And they will update automatically when the Weather Service changes their maps. So even if it's just for that, if you're even outside the area, if it's just for that, go ahead and download the app. It's absolutely free. So what do you got to lose? And you got easy access to these snow forecast maps during the wintertime. Less than 1 inch for Baltimore. You go up to Leesburg. You go ahead to Frederick. And I kind of go with these numbers. They make sense. 2 to 3 inches. Hagerstown, 2 to 3. Cumberland, 2 to 3. Westminster, 1 to 2. A little bit less as you head down toward I-81 in the western part of the state, where you're seeing a coating to 1 inch or 2. And then it just tails off to nothing when you head from Route 64 to Charlottesville on southward. Now here's central PA. I think I forecasted basically a 1 to 2, 1 to 3 inch snowfall. The Weather Service is on the 2 to 3 inch range here, so yeah, it's close enough. South of 76 was where we had the snow from this event from Saturday. So if you were north of 76, you got much less, and once you got up toward Route 80, you got nothing. So this time around, it looks like for central PA, it's going to be generally a couple of inches. Maybe a few spots will get up to close to 3 out of all of this. In the Hudson Valley, from Poughkeepsie northward, all the way up the Hudson Valley, up Route 87, and you head up towards Saratoga, Warrensburg, Indian Lake, Old Forge, mostly 3 to 4 inch snows, and also in western Massachusetts, in the Berkshires, 3 to 4, and that actually even extends down into northern Connecticut, north of Route 84 in Litchfield County. Brattleboro in Vermont, 3 to 4, Townsend, 3 to 4. By the way, whenever you look at these maps, just remember that you'll see this and you'll say, well, how come there's all this blank stuff? You got half the map blank on the east side and half of it blank on the west side. Well, what you're seeing is the forecast from the actual National Weather Service office in terms of their jurisdiction. So you have to go to the next office to fill in those blanks. And when we go to the east, for example, we just saw that western Connecticut, north of 84 in Litchfield County, was in a 3 to 4 inch zone. Well, now we can see the rest of southern New England, where we've got 3 to 4 for northeastern Connecticut, 3 to 4 across much of Massachusetts. They're going for 2 to 3 in Boston, 3 to 4 in Newburyport. Oh, and by the way, that Boston statistic comes out of Logan. Logan had very little snow apparently from that November system, but just away from the airport, they did report accumulating snows of an inch or more. So that 1 inch statistic, that lack of a 1 inch snowfall, is kind of isolated to Logan Airport. Logan being closer to the water, perhaps there was some kind of, a little bit of warming there that kept snow from accumulating, or who knows what the reason why they don't have that they have the snow number that they have for the total season. Down in southeastern Mass, Plymouth an inch or 2, New Bedford an inch or 2, less than an inch at Hyannis and Provincetown, and out at Chatham and over on the islands. And in New Jersey, we're looking at 1 to 2 inches. Mainly, I think the Turnpike is probably going to mark the line here where you're going to you go from a coating to an inch or 2, and that's what I have here from the Turnpike north and west. And then you go north of Route 78. The Weather Service has got 2 to 3 and even 3 to 4 for Sussex. I wonder if that's pushing it a little bit. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning more on the low side of the numbers. Mount Holly's going a little higher up in the northwest, and also some 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 inch snow amounts as you get into eastern Pennsylvania. Southeast PA, around Philadelphia, they're going for an inch or 2. Coatesville an inch or 2, Doylestown an inch or 2, and Reading at 2 to 3. You're in a winter where it's been difficult for it to snow in this area. So in a way, you're kind of in prove-it-to-me mode, especially when you're dealing with a system that doesn't have a whole lot of moisture with it. I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to that we're going to wind up with some upside. Now, on Long Island, this is where I kind of disagree a little bit. I would have probably stretched that 1 to 2 inch line or the inch line a little bit further east, north of the Long Island Expressway, into Suffolk County, and maybe out to Riverhead. Long Island's always a funny place when it comes to snow. You think sometimes that warm air is going to come in off the ocean, and it doesn't. And instead, you wind up draining cold air down from Connecticut and New England. That keeps it a degree or 2 colder, which can make a huge difference. And then you see the higher amounts. New York City about an inch. New York City has an interesting statistic that Scott Briller has brought up a few times, and we've mentioned it. December, a trace of snow. So far in January, a trace of snow. If you go back in New York City records, which go back to 1869, that's a long period there, 150 years, there has never been a back-to-back December, January where there's been just a trace of snow for both months. We've had it happen where there's been a trace for December. We've had it happen, and it's rare, but it has happened, where we've had a trace of snow in January, but we've never had back-to-back December, January with just a trace. And as we head north of White Plains, The Weather Service going for 3 inches. Coastal Connecticut, about an inch, maybe a little less, just south of 95 once you go east of New Haven, and 1 to 2. I don't have a particular problem with these numbers. I don't know if I would have pushed the high end up to 3 inches. I might have just gone for a coating to a couple of inches here and into the general area. There might be some isolated 3-inch amounts when this is all finished up. Radars tonight are not particularly busy, with 2 exceptions. You've got some showers down in South Florida near the Keys. You've got some showers developing in parts of southeast Texas. And then you have this large area of solid rain. And, of course, in the mountains, we're talking snow in California from San Diego running up to just north. You go north and west of San Francisco away from the coast. And this has been going on for a few days now, and there's more to come with the system that's sitting just offshore and kind of stalled out. And we also have moisture down in Arizona. Now, this is the energy that's coming eastward that is going to create system number 1, which we're going to look at right now on the NAM. Wednesday, I've moved it up to Wednesday. Tomorrow at about 5 o'clock, actually 6 o'clock, I'm sorry. And there's another weak cold front that's coming through into the northeast. So it should be a pretty decent day tomorrow. We might actually break the 40-degree mark. And you can start to see, if you go back through Texas and Oklahoma, you can see the cyclonic turning here, the isobars. And there's your next low that's going to be coming out. And you start to also see the beginnings of precipitation, snow in Nebraska. Some mixed precip in Kansas, and that gradually takes hold as it moves eastward. And there's your little low Thursday morning at 10 o'clock in central Missouri. Not a whole lot of snow yet with this. Just got a little band there up in Iowa, northwest Missouri, and then some precip moving into Illinois and Indiana. And it gets into that colder air, so you start to see more in the way of snow. And that area just expands. This is nothing that's particularly heavy. And now we're at 10 o'clock Thursday night, and we've got snow reaching in through almost to southeastern PA, almost on a diagonal to northwest PA. And by 1 a.m., it looks like it should be, at least on the radar anyway, we'll be seeing some snow over New Jersey, Pennsylvania, down into Maryland, Delaware, and into northeastern Virginia. It appears to me that the Weather Service has actually kind of bought the colder NAM view of this. And being that the system is weak, you can't have it both ways. If you had a wrapped up, more intense system, that would, with the high going where it's going, it probably would warm up and rain in a lot of these areas. But because the system is weak, the warming is going to be very slow to happen. We're probably going to be sitting with temperatures in the upper 20s to around 30 through much of the night, and that'll be enough. As long as you don't have any kind of a strong wind, and it wouldn't even have to be that strong. But as long as you don't have a screaming wind coming in from the east, it should keep even coastal areas as snow. The air aloft is actually cold enough. When we look at the 850 level, up at about 4,700 feet. The zero line is pretty far to the south. And one of the things that's been brought up in conversation that I've seen is the NAM is taking this low. You see there's a low there over Lake Erie, a weak low that disappears. And if you look closely in the green out in the ocean, where I've got this, I don't know if you can see the mouse. You probably can't. But if you look closely in the green area, there's actually 2 closed isobars there. That's where a little secondary low develops and moves away pretty much to the east, actually bringing Nova Scotia some light snows with this. And this sort of goes against what some of the global models have been showing, which is that low well to the north and west. And a few questions have popped up about this as to why the non-global models like the NAM, for example, and I'm not 100% sure. I got to find out about this as to whether the German model, I'm guessing that the German model is not a global model, and the UCMET I don't believe is a global model, but I could be wrong. There's so many of these models. Who keeps track of these things? I mean, the European, the Canadian, and the GFS are global. I'm not sure about those two, but the question has arisen that why is it that we're seeing the tracks of the non-global models being further south than the global, particularly when it comes to the next system? Because the Icon model, for example, is further south with the next system. Not enough to make a huge difference, but for some areas it might. The UCMET is way south, and I wish I could show you the UCMET, but I did look at it today, and it tracks the low well to the south and east of what the other models are doing. So it'll be interesting to see if the NAM is correct on this and whether that means anything. I don't know if it does. Sometimes when these kinds of things happen, snow lovers are notorious for this, and I do it too sometimes. But when you're at a point where you're sort of trying to grasp at straws, particularly in a situation where earlier global modeling was trying to show you into a significant snow and ice storm, and you root for that if you're a snow lover. But my point is that you wonder whether it's a grasping of straws where the global models initially showed you in a cold and snow situation, and then it winds up that you don't have that. And so you start grabbing at things saying, well, maybe this is the reason, maybe that's the reason. And I have found oftentimes that it is very rare that the grasping of straws works. That models usually, when we get especially inside the very short range, they'll get it right. But you know what? Let's have an open mind on this, and let's see what happens when that low goes out and where it winds up. And we'll switch to the GFS shortly because we're at the end of the NAM. This was the late afternoon NAM run, which only goes out to 1 a.m. Saturday. And you see that snow area now expanding across Kansas, Nebraska, western Iowa. The low center is inside a closed isobar somewhere in north central Texas, where there's only a little bit of rain being indicated there. So we're at the beginnings of the development here. And now I'm going to switch over to the GFS. And by the way, you notice where the GFS actually has that low. It really is all in the north. It doesn't really develop anything out into the south. So like the NAM has, it has the low from that first system going by to the north. And the other thing is the GFS, I think, is wrong with the overwarming here, mainly perhaps because of the pressure falls and the lower pressures are more to the north, where the NAM's lower pressures are more to the south. So this could be a reason why it brings in a shot of snow that goes over to rain in central and south Jersey and over Long Island. And I've been told that the one of the things that the parallel GFS model is supposed to correct is this tendency, since this last upgrade of the GFS, where it has the bottom part of the atmosphere, it doesn't handle very well when it comes to snow and rain. I've noticed that that popped up a number of times last March in the whole the four nor'easters of the apocalypse. So we'll get this out of here. Here comes the low on the GFS, which it has in north central Oklahoma, moving into and along the Missouri border. Now, when you look at the map here, when you look at the surface map, if you didn't have anything else and you had just this, one of the things that stands out is you see where the isobars are kind of pointed toward Ohio and into western PA. So it looks as if that's where the low wants to go here, the way the isobars are oriented in this sort of northeast southwest direction. Looks like it wants to head to that bulge that's pushing into southwestern Pennsylvania. You also have higher pressures draped around it. So you can see the breakout of heavy snow, the darker blue snows in southeastern Kansas, and then arcing around northern Missouri. At this point, on the GFS at least, because of the track of the low, it's raining in St. Louis. You do get the snow to get up to Chicago. Then once the low goes by, and there's bitter cold air up to the north coming down out of Canada that's going to get pulled down, you start to see the rain snow line advance southeastward through Missouri. In the meantime, cold front that runs down from the low looks like it'll probably produce some thunderstorms from western Tennessee down into Mississippi and into Louisiana. So going into Saturday evening, as you see from that bulge of the isobars, the surface low looks like it wants to go into northern West Virginia or southwestern Pennsylvania. The that reddish purple is sleet and freezing rain. The yellow is heavy rain just south of the snow ice rain line. There might actually be sleet in that yellow band with that cold air just to the north. Situations like this, cold air oftentimes winds up being more important, so you have to be careful. Now for the northeast, the literal interpretation says that we'll have perhaps some snow at the start, Saturday evening, from central New Jersey and northeastern Pennsylvania northward, and on up through upstate New York, and then it changes over to heavy rain. You got to wait for the low to go by, and that goes by Sunday morning. And here's where it gets tricky. You're getting heavy snows in western PA, upstate New York, and Vermont, except for the southern part of Vermont. You see it's mostly rain in southern Vermont and New Hampshire at this point. Snow in Maine, central northern Vermont, central northern New Hampshire, and in New York State, north of Albany. It goes back to snow right before it cuts off and ends. Usually in situations like this where I am and points south, a lot of times what happens is that the precip just shuts off, and you don't really get very much on the backside. So you got to be careful. There were a number of runs. There are situations where it does happen. If you've got if you're waiting for another wave to move up and the trough is moving only very slowly to the east, where there's room for a second wave that develops maybe, say, off North Carolina and runs north-northeast, so you get another surge of precip after the cold air has moved in at the surface anyway. That's when you can wind up seeing a substantial amount on the backside. But it's something that really doesn't happen very often. And then it clears the coastline. Now, after this is Sunday evening, I'm going to pull up a sounding. Let's pull up a sounding in and around New York City. And what we're doing is basically taking a snapshot picture of the atmosphere from the bottom up and looking at these are great on Tropical Tidbits. It was one of the best, Levi Cowan of tropicaltidbits.com. That website with the maps is insanely great, okay? And it's free, which is awesome. But he added these soundings, which are so useful. If you look to read this, first off, I'll just give you the important stuff that you can look at. The winds here, and on this side of the scale, you have the level. So the 1,000 millibar level, the 1012 millibar level is the surface. So this is just above the surface at 1,000 millibars. And then you go up to 900, 800. So 850 is about 4,700 feet. And then 500, about roughly 18,000 feet. And then beyond. So the red line plots the temperature, and the green line plots the dew point. And at 7 o'clock in the evening, we are at New York City, we are seeing a temperature of 20 and a dew point of 0. So that's very dry air. This would suggest certainly that the precip here is long gone. And with the lunar eclipse, by the way, on Sunday night, it's quite likely now that skies will be mostly clear and this system will have moved away. There was concern that a few days ago, at least for the model's concern anyway, that we would wind up seeing precip well into Sunday night. Well, now everything seems to be moving a little faster, so if it moves in faster, it'll get out faster. But that's the sounding at 7 o'clock. I'll pull up a couple of other points. I'm going to go up to about where Albany is, and the temperature there at the same time frame is 0, okay? So that shows you how cold the surface temperatures are forecast by the GFS. And I can tell you, by the way, having looked at them, that the European is even colder than the GFS by about 5 to as much as 10 degrees. If we go up a little further in upstate New York for the same time frame, close to Plattsburgh, it's -8. All right, on up into New England. I'll just punch up Boston here. Boston is 28 at the time, so because the front has clears a little later, but the soundings are very, very useful because they not only can show us the surface temperature, but oftentimes, for example, if we look here, you can see that you can't see the green line because the temperature and dew point are right on top of each other. So the atmosphere is saturated all the way up. Now, the dashed line that's on an angle, that is the freezing line. So if we were looking at a situation, and we can do that, we're going to pull up a sounding here in the red area, okay? Again, saturated all the way up into the atmosphere at 25,000 feet. It's just socked in. There is a point now when you watch these temperatures, okay, look at the red line. It's 29 at the point that I picked, I think it was in Ohio, and then just above the 900 millibar level, okay, so a couple of thousand feet up, the temperature jumps and goes above the freezing mark. You see how that red line bulges to the right of the angled dash line? That is an area in the atmosphere that is forecast to be above freezing. So this is why it's showing either freezing rain, or that could very well be sleet. And then it goes back below freezing once you get above, say, about 5,000 or 6,000 feet, and then it goes on up there. So you can get some very useful information looking at these soundings if you're trying to forecast sleet or freezing rain. So make use of them and get used to seeing them, because they are very much a handy tool. And there's your low that goes on out. Now, I want to just show you, it's not one of my favorite models, okay? But I want to show you the icon, the icon model, or the German model, which, first off, has a bit of a colder look than the GFS in the east with the first thing, although it does seem to, holds on to that northern low, but it does try to form the low more to the south like the NAM does. You see it there, well south of Nova Scotia. This low comes out a little flatter looking and a little further south. It's also slower, by the way. I'm not sure whether that's correct or not, because this is supposed to be Saturday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then this is Saturday at 7 p.m. Look at the difference between the Icon model and the GFS. Now, I find the Icon to be, having watched it on and off these last couple of weeks or so, or even longer than that, it's very erratic, and oftentimes it takes you on, down the wrong road. So, but my point is, because of the fact that how things look in the upper air, the Icon has more cold air draped around this, higher pressures across the northern plains, the northern Great Lakes, and into New England, and it keeps the low pressure from, instead of the low trying to shoot up, and it may eventually wind up getting there, it goes a little further to the east. It's not going to be enough to really make a difference, but it does bring heavier snows with a colder view across Pennsylvania and New Jersey. See all that dark blue in Pennsylvania? This would suggest that there would be a pretty sizable thumping of snow that would occur Saturday night, and rather than a quick changeover, it could snow for a good part of Saturday night into Sunday morning before you do ultimately change over to rain. And also look where it has the surface low in western North Carolina, as opposed to, this is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday, whereas the GFS has the surface low already up off of the coast of Maine near Portland. All right, and here's why. We can't really see it too well, but I'm gonna go to the paint box, and hang on one second here. Okay, so we're going to bring up the paint box. And before we do that, I want you to look at this trough that's coming in for the second system. So we'll start with the North America view of the upper air. Watch, first off, as always, you know, that whole analogy that I always give with respect to watching gears turning, this is really what we have here, gears in the atmosphere that are turning and changing in size and in magnitude. You've got that wrapped up system off the Pacific Northwest. This is for Thursday. The map is for Thursday at 1 p.m. You've got a nice little vortex there sitting in Hudson Bay that's rotating and bringing cold air down from the north. Nothing especially cold, at least with respect to the east, but cold enough. The coldest air winds up staying up in northern New England, upstate New York, and in and along the northern lakes and on up and through southern Canada. That's rotating around. The system in the Pacific is coming in. Now watch that arm that's swinging in that northern stream. You see it here? It swings around near Lake Winnipeg and approaches Minnesota. It phases with that southern stream system. And as a result, you wind up seeing the surface that the GFS has. You've got this long phased trough. And earlier this week, we saw some of the model runs keeping the two streams separate, which would have meant for a colder setup in the eastern part of the United States, and particularly in the Northeast. And this would have perhaps impacted my area in a big way. But gradually, these models went to this more phased look. And we're still at Tuesday, and you still have the German model perhaps showing the look. And I don't, unfortunately, you have to kind of use your imagination here, and it might be better if we use the tighter view. But it seems to me that at least on the icon, if the colors represent those height lines that you saw on the other map, the phase is less effective here. It doesn't have as much of a phase, and it looks like the icon is still saying that, well, maybe the north may wind up trying to run out the south, where this whole thing just winds up getting flattened. And I think that's what the UK Met model did, the British model, where it has that northern stream kind of outrunning the south to some degree and keeping things much colder across New England and down into perhaps the northern areas of the southern areas of the Northeast, going into the northern mid-Atlantic states. It would be more of a snow event if that were the case. And you can sound from the tone of my voice that I'm not too enthused by what they did, because there's not a whole lot of support from the other models. The European, the Canadian, have all gone with this phased look with respect to this system. And here's the Europeans' view of the upper air. It actually, the streams are somewhat separate here Sunday morning, but then it all gets wrapped up as this upper low forms in southeastern Canada, and it just picks it up, and the whole trough just goes negative. This was something that the models did not show, particularly the European. The European was in the unphased, flat look, kept trying to take lows east off Virginia, running it out east-northeast, and now it's gone to this sort of phased and even cutting off look, where you wind up with a warmer solution. And the European would suggest that you really have to kind of go north and west of, certainly north and west of 95. The European's a little complicated because it does seem to want to produce a heavy burst of snow Saturday night north and west of New York City. After a quick start, it goes to rain quickly New York City and along the coast and points south, including most of Pennsylvania. But you get into northeast PA, and particularly you go into upstate New York, that you have a pretty solid burst of heavy snow that goes to heavy rain, then back to ice, and then back to snow before it ends. That is the solution of that particular model. And right now, it's hard for me to argue when you've got the three global models doing what they're doing. It's basically very hard for me to fall back and say, well, the NAM is taking this first low south, therefore using the butterfly flaps its wings concept, that's going to change everything downstream. It might, but I want to see evidence of it first before I make it part of my practical forecast. Otherwise, at this stage of the game, it's really kind of hard to fight where the models are going. And actually, in terms of the overall flavor of the flow here, in terms of what is going on in the jet stream pattern, where the trough axis is closer to 90 west than it is to 80. And that's problematic in the east. You also really don't have any blocking. So without any kind of blocking out in the Atlantic, it's hard to hold cold air in and force a track further south. You know, we had a bit of a negative NAO with the system in the mid-Atlantic states back over the weekend. We had a negative North Atlantic oscillation with regards to the system back in December. We don't really have it right now. And in fact, now I can bring the paint box up because I said I was going to do that. But give me 1 second here. I'm going to copy the image. And we'll paste it on. So this is the GFS upper air. And let me bring it up so you guys can see it. And you can now. So this is the GFS upper air. You can see that, you know, this trough, my God, it's the long wave trough here that's developed. Talk about a long wavelength. I mean, it goes all the way up into northern Labrador and runs all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico. You've got this really almost ruler-like southwest flow up the East Coast. And on the other side of this, by the way, because we're talking about this bitter cold air, look at the polar flow coming in. You've got this ridge up in Western Canada, and you've got this long flow of northwest winds aloft pulling down cold air from northern Canada and in the Arctic regions into the Great Lakes and into the eastern U.S. once this whole system goes by. Now, going forward, I'm going to jump a little bit here in the long range, because what ultimately happens, and I'm going to jump out now to day 11, and every day I've noticed a remarkable consistency in the long range, which doesn't happen too often in the period from 10 days and beyond, where it is trying to drop a sizable chunk of the polar vortex southward. So some very, very cold Arctic air would then result. So let me clear this screen, and we'll bring up, I'm going now to day 11. Look at this setup if it winds up verifying. I mean, this is really brutal air. We're talking the weekend of January 26th, 27th, that this is being shown for. I mean, this is really insane in terms of the cold air that's coming down. You've got, when I say insane, I'm just saying in terms of, you know, how deep this vortex is. You don't, you know, sometimes you can go a whole winter and not see anything remotely resembling something like this. But this is straight cold air flow from northern Greenland coming all the way down into the east and going all the way down into Florida, by the way. And you can see the flow also has a little bit of a Siberian connection with air coming from there and riding down on the backside. You have, as a signature here, we don't have the actual teleconnections values, but when you look at this in terms of the map, two things that stand out. When you look at the geographic areas that calculate the North Atlantic Oscillation and the East Pacific Oscillation, both of which, when negative, can favor cold air, particularly the East, particularly the EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation. When you get this big ridge up here in the Northwest Pacific, that feeds into a negative EPO. There are a few other geographic areas that are involved, but that is a negative EPO and East Pacific Oscillation. When you have that, and I would imagine if we had the actual teleconnections values to look at, it would probably be either at the top of the scale or in one of those off-the-wall positions. You also have fairly strong ridging in the Atlantic that goes up into Greenland, so I'm thinking that you've got you probably have a fairly active and negative NAO here in this case, and it would make sense because in the midst of all of this, locked between the two is this big vortex that can't move out of the way, so all it can do is take what it has and just drop it southward. moves to the, basically moves to the point of least resistance, and the vortex winds up dropping south. So, it's been my contention that at some point along the way, we're going to see some bitter cold air coming in for behind this system, no question. But in terms of a widespread polar outbreak, it's been my belief that there's going to be one somewhere in the next couple of weeks. The models seem to be showing this in a strong way and in a relatively consistent way. Well, at least the GFS is going out beyond day 10, and now we're almost into that day 10 time frame, so we can gain more and more confidence with respect to where this is going in the longer term. So let me just go back to, let me get rid of this, and we're going to go back to the maps so I can take you through the whole sequence here of the upper air. And let me roll it back. So here's our trough for the weekend. There's actually another system that's going to be swinging down and around and lifting up toward the middle part of next week. And I'm not really going to spend any time on it because, you know what? There's too many things on the table. I've got this first weather system to deal with Thursday night into Friday, even though it's a minor event, and whatever implications, if there are any, with regards to the one that follows. And there's attention being focused on the one that follows. I'm not going to look at this point with the third, just to say that you still have this very active jet that is swinging weather systems around. So that goes up and out. And now here's where you have that vortex just kind of strengthening and dropping southward, and it stays there locked in here through the rest of the period. You've got actually. Part of the vortex goes out to east of Newfoundland to what they call, looks like the 50-50 low, 50 north and 50 west, and then you have more energy that's dropping back through the plains. This is actually a pretty bullish view with regards to storminess toward the end of the month and maybe the beginning of February, but this is just kind of a one-run snapshot, and at this point, I don't know if it's going to look like this when we run it again, but it might look something similar, but it's kind of an interesting upper air setup as we head toward the very end of January. The last day on the long range now is January 31st. That's 16 days from now. Every day it's one day closer to the end of the winter season. Obviously, we still have a long way to go, and probably a lot of opportunities ahead for all sorts of exciting weather. So. That pretty much sums up where we are tonight with all of this. I still have a lot of questions regarding how this whole weekend thing is going to play out in terms of a specific forecast. But thankfully, the first system is there as a distraction because of there's a distraction away from the second system, so I can not have to. Oftentimes when you're waiting 7 days for something to happen, 7 and 8 days for something to happen with nothing to distract you in between, by the time you get to inside 4 days, you already have such a headache as a forecaster, you really just want it to go away. So focusing on the first thing to some degree has been a bit of a blessing in disguise. It's a minor event, yes, but nonetheless, it is something and I don't, by the way, just as I said from the beginning, I don't see a lot of potential here for upside with that first system. There's a limited amount of moisture, limited amount of warm advection, and that's going to probably, that's going to cut back. Most of the liquid precip amounts that are being forecast are, under a quarter of an inch, and some places a little bit more. By the way, while we have it here, let me do two things. First off, let me pull up the total snowfall map for the next 10 days. And you can see the southern extent does go down into parts of Tennessee and even into northern Alabama and North Georgia. So that might be some of the systems coming on later down the road. Snow pretty much from coast to coast, and very heavy snows a bit, but not completely front end loaded in the Northeast. So this is a very, very wintry look. In Europe, let me just quickly go through what's happening in Europe since we've been following this along as well. And here's your 10-day snowfall forecast. It's been very busy in Central and Southern Europe, and it will continue to be as snowfall is substantial, moves into Western Europe, almost into Western France, and a good chunk of Spain and Portugal on this particular run. And you're getting some substantial snows being indicated for England and Ireland, except for the extreme southern part of England, at least from what the model snapshot is. So let's real quick go through the surface here. We've been talking about the time frame after January 20th for Western Europe, England, Ireland, and Scotland in particular. I think that still remains the case as that upper high, that ridge that's been sitting off of England breaks down. And here's where the real break comes, is right around Monday the 21st of January, and you start to see some colder air and some snows into England and Ireland. The model's been seems a little bit less bullish on the snow in the longer term. I didn't get a chance to really get into the 500 for today as to the Ys. Some of the prior runs were dropping a pretty big vortex into England, into northwestern Europe, and dropping it southward. It does have it here around January 23rd. It has some semblance of one, but it looks a little less deep, a little not as strong as what some runs did a couple of days ago, but it's still far enough out. It was way out in the long range still. We're at day 8 and 9, so models could certainly adjust, but it's not quite as fierce looking. But this could be a one-run situation. I didn't, like I said, I really didn't have a chance to go back and look at the whole thing. So hopefully I'll have a little bit more time to do that tomorrow. So I'm going to come to the chat board. So hang on one second. We did a lot tonight. Covered a lot of weather here, and we've got a nice crowd that's still hanging around, which is a good thing. So I'm just going to give me a moment. I'm going to scan through some of your comments. What am I going to get in Johnstown, PA? Asked John Curry. I see the operational models have heavy snow north and west, but I do see the 18Z GFS ensemble still has 10 inches. You're kind of on the cusp there. Pittsburgh, Johnstown, that area in southwest PA, you're kind of on a cusp where, depending on where that surface low winds up and how much warm advection gets in there as it tries to fight that cold air that's trying to move in the other direction, I don't know. A few more runs to go to figure that out, okay? I'm going to punt because I have to. I got to give it a closer look. But that's your main battle. You probably would love to see that flatter look. Even if you can get the low to go into eastern West Virginia or maybe western Virginia and pop up through central and eastern PA would be a much more bullish scenario for you with regards to snow, even if you wind up losing it for a little while. It's very, very tough. This is a very tough forecast at this point. As all the players are just kind of, they haven't really come ashore yet. The energy may not have been completely sampled, so we want to really kind of wait another couple of days before we get a little bit more definitive. James Hines, so if what I'm seeing with the polar vortex is correct at 360 hours, the GFS models, those heights are very high and warm looking at 10 millibars East Coast. Well, that's all part of that, the destruction of the polar vortex in the stratosphere. And it does certainly reflect that negative EPO. And, with what I saw from 360 to 384, you're talking about an increasingly negative NAO as well. That was a very, very bullish upper air setup toward the end of that 16-day period with regards to snow in the east. And let me just make it clear. When I say the east, I'm not necessarily talking about just my area, okay? At the end of the day, when it comes to all of this, and as I've repeatedly said, the pattern change you want and the pattern change you get are two different things. You can have all the big picture things where you want them to be, but at the end of the day with these individual systems, where's the trough? Where's the mean trough position? Where's the axis of that trough? If it's at 90 west, that's great for Chicago. It's great for those cities in and around the Great Lakes, Detroit, depending on the situation. depending on the position of the short waves as they come along, Indianapolis, central Illinois, down to St. Louis perhaps. But it's not so good for the east. If you've got this kind of long wave trough that runs all the way from northern Canada all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico. And that winds up bringing up warm air. And there's no blocking, as we said, so you can't get redevelopment. So you could have all these, all the big picture players could be in the right place, but in terms of the individual systems, if you don't have the troughs and ridges in the right place, you're not going to go very far when it comes to snow, maybe in your particular area, but it might benefit others. Let's see. Zim is on tonight. Nice to see you, as always. The late start or would have people thinking that the season is over. I got to tell you, Zim, quite honestly, I have really kind of learned to block out that noise. It's just noise. These are screaming, temper tantrum throwing people. One of the, among many things, one of the things that really bothers me about when I, and it's hard for me not to see it because it's all, it's on the internet and I'm connected either directly or indirectly to all these different groups, weather groups and so on. And basically, they sit and it's a sort of repetition in terms of what each model run did literally. Well, something, I can do that. I can look at a map and, all of us can do that. You can look at a map and tell me and see, well, it's got the low in Pittsburgh, where in the last run it had the low at Williamsport, just to pick two different, points. You could pick any 2 points. Well, I can tell you that. You can tell me that. But the question is, can you tell me why it's doing that? Can you tell me what's happening in the upper air that's causing this to happen? Why is a storm center in position A on one run or 3 runs ago, and suddenly it shows up in position B? And most of the time they can't. So you don't get any value of what is happening. And I've been, one of my aims is to take you every night on this sort of jet stream adventure, just to see how things evolve and just to see how those gears work. And it gets lost when you see these social media posts, for example, where they plop up a map that's got, they'll plop up a snow map 10 days out, or they'll plop up a map that shows a wrapped up storm with all this heavy snow, emphasizing perhaps one particular point. And there's no context to it. They don't give you any context. They don't give you any background. They don't give you any sense of the meteorology that's going on. That's really important because when you start to gain a grasp of that, that's when you can start to look at things and really begin to figure out, hey, the model's kind of doing this, but you know what? I don't think that's what's really happening. And you start to see other things that are going on in the atmosphere and the jet stream flow. And sometimes you don't even have to look that high. There's oftentimes, certainly when you get into the short range, and in particular when you're dealing with situations where cold air is critical, you're going to want to fine tune that and really look closely at the bottom of the atmosphere and look for every possible angle that could be supporting what's happening. I've seen it so many times in my neck of the woods where models have forecasted the bottom part of the atmosphere to be borderline to warm or above freezing, when in reality, because the model did not really pick up, for example, perhaps more of a dominant north-northeast wind bringing cold air down from New England, that it's actually the opposite, and you wind up sometimes with a 5, and I've even seen 10-degree temperature differences or higher between what's being modeled and what is actually reality. At the end of the day, you have to really look at what the actual weather is going on, and there is an overemphasis in terms of what the models are doing, and we all tend to do it to some degree, and there is a sort of a crutch factor to it. You want to kind of have a leg up as far as the long range is concerned, but that's just that's part of this game. It's handling the uncertainty and trying to figure out the mystery of where we're going. If you can do that And if you watch weather long enough, you can figure it out. If you can do that, you can become pretty good at this. It takes a while, but you can become pretty good at this. So, it is now coming up on an hour and 10 minutes. I think my record is an hour and 20 and change, but I got to put an end to this because it is 8:15 and I got to get busy doing other things. So thank you very much for being here tonight. You've been, you're great as always, and I really, really am thrilled that I've been getting some nice crowds on these YouTube live streams, and of course growing my channel, getting close to 8,000 subscribers now. We want to get to the big 10,000. So let's keep going. If you're new to the channel and you're just watching and you like it, hit the subscribe button. It's absolutely free. If you are, let's say, weather geeky, and you really like this stuff and you can't get enough of it, you might like my weather platform on Patreon. And here's the link to that. It's a subscription platform, but it's just $2 a month. It's a great way to support what I'm doing, both here on YouTube, and you get a lot of extra weather. We talk, all kinds of things that we can't really talk about too much on the videos. And you get live streams just for Patreon members. And there's a nice little group on there now. It's not exactly a little group, it's a growing group. There's a nice little interactive group going on there now. And we're going to be planning to do more and more things along the way. So do consider that. And thank you for those of you who have joined. Christopher, you got to do me a favor. You're going to have to send me like the way I'm supposed to pronounce your last name. Is it... oh, God. I'm trying to think of Mike Krzyzewski and how to pronounce that, your last name. So you know what? I'm not even going to attempt it. You please, if you could, message me, because you just joined the Patreon platform too. So message me with how I'm supposed to say it, all right? And I apologize. I should have, I try, but I can't. And thank you very much, by the way, for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really appreciate it. You don't have to do that, but thank you so much for doing it. And those of you who have Android devices, you can download my free weather app on Google Play. And by the way, you can watch the live stream from the app itself, because I preload the live stream into the app every day. And you can watch it while you're on, you can watch it on YouTube, of course, but you can also watch it on the app, and you can watch the replay if you miss it. Lord Kate, always good to see you here. Thank you so much. You got your video tonight. I know you've been talking about getting withdrawal. You got your Patreon video yesterday. I didn't get a chance to do it today, but I will have time tomorrow, particularly tomorrow morning after the NAM is done, and maybe a little bit of the GFS. I'll do a Patreon live stream so we can take a look at both systems, and then I'll be able to get into the car and get to work. So we got Patreon, we got the app, and one other easy way, by the way, if you'd like to support my channel, there's a link on the descriptor to this live stream and to the descriptor to this video to Amazon. And we are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. So if you shop on Amazon, if you use this link, search for whatever you get, and Amazon, out of their pocket, throws me back enough for a couple of cigars every once in a while, and I'm completely thrilled. So thanks very much for being here. I'll see about, I don't know if I'm going to do a live Facebook tonight. Joe is not here, so I might skip it because I am a little tired. And then we'll get back to normal tomorrow night with the Joe and Joe Show. And he's going to be on our live stream tomorrow night on YouTube. He promised me. Okay? Have a great night. Snow lovers, all I can say is keep your fingers crossed depending on where your location is. Some of you will be winners, some of you will be big winners, and some of you inevitably will wind up being disappointed. Good night, everybody.